Welcome to the Concord Bookshop and to this afternoon's author event with Sarah McCoy and The Baker's Daughter. We want to thank you for supporting your local independent bookstore this afternoon, which allows us to continue to have special events and author readings like this one. Sarah's second novel, The Baker's Daughter, is a seamless weaving of two distinct times and places, Nazi-era Germany and contemporary El Paso, Texas. Elsie Schmidt is the elderly baker that ties these two stories together. It is her story, along with that of journalist Reba Adams, that pulls readers in to contemplate family, friendship, and love, as well as the value of forgiveness and of second chances. We become invested in these women. They're characters that see other people as individuals, not as indistinct groups of ethnicity. Tatiana de Rosnay, who is the author of Sarah's Key, calls The Baker's Daughter a beautiful, heartbreaking gem of a novel written just the way I like them, with the past coming back to haunt the present, endearing heroines. Hopeful. You'll wolf it up in one delicious gulp. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a fantastic recommendation, endorsement, because a delicious gulp is what The Baker's Daughter is. It's a feast for book groups, and it has so many topics of discussion. There's a readers group reading guide online that people can turn to, and in the back of the book are about a dozen recipes. So what better way to bring your book group together than something of German descent or Tex-Mex on the table. So I'm going to turn the podium over to Sarah, who will read an excerpt from The Baker's Daughter, and then she'll take questions before we break for book signing.
Thank you. Why don't I start standing and then I'll sit? Do you mind if I move around? Is that fine with everyone? Hello. I'm going to put my hat down. I see another red hat in the audience. I like it, sir. You look fetching. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here in Concord. This is my first time to the New England, this far up north, Boston. This is my first time to Boston, and I have been wooed and won by this town and by Concord. My husband and I just finished walking up and down for the last hour this main street, and look at this house. Look at that house. Look at that one. Isn't this beautiful? I'm kind of maybe, hopefully, maybe paving the way that we might end up someplace up here for a little bit. I would love to live up this way for just a little bit of my life if I could. So thank you for having a beautiful town and for having me here today to talk about The Baker's Daughter. Thank you to Dawn. She has done an amazing job welcoming me from El Paso, which is a long ways away, in case you weren't aware. That's 2,000 more miles. So from all that way, Dawn befriended me and said, come to Concord and we'll take care of you. And she was not lying. She has been the consummate hostess. So thank you to her and to Concord Bookshop for having me. She gave a little bit, I was going to give a little bit of I'll do it again. For those who are curious or who maybe aren't as familiar with the book, it is about two very strong women. Elsie Schmidt, a German baker, and Reba Adams, a young journalist in El Paso, Texas. And Reba is assigned to go and interview the elderly Elsie at her German bakery. And she goes, and it's for a Christmas piece for the local magazine. She goes, and Elsie isn't the easy subject that she expected. She's kind of sassy, and she turns the tables on Reba and starts questioning her on why she won't commit to her fiance, who's a U.S. Border Patrol agent. At the same time, she's also asking questions for her story, and those questions are forcing Elsie to remember a really horrific last year during World War II in Nazi-occupied Germany, where she lived. So those are the two parallel storylines that are throughout the book, and they alternate chapters. So that's how the book is set up. It's kind of a little of an intro into it. I've been asked, how did you pair these two? How did you do Germany and El Paso? I mean, worlds apart there. And I can't explain exactly how the cosmos and the stars orchestrate for inspiration. I can't give you an answer to that, but what I can give you is a date. I keep a moleskin journal. I don't know if anybody else does that. Who are there writers in here? Anybody? Yes, 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 yes. I see some heads nodding over here. I keep a moleskin and I write down everything and anything that comes to mind. I don't use fancy handwriting. This is my place to just whatever pops into my head goes down on the page. I've got random. I've got a picture of my niece and stamps from Virginia from right before I left. Because now I live in El Paso. I've been there 4 years, but before that I lived in Virginia for many years. So I was starting to get homesick. So I put stamps in here. I mean, anything goes in here. Here's a postcard from Bandelier, and no one's heard of that, in Santa Fe. My husband and I went and climbed there, and so I stick a postcard in. I mean, I literally write down anything. I don't even know what these are. Oh, this is New Orleans. I liked the food at this place called Clancy's, so I stuck it in there. I mean, I put anything in here. And a lot of my thoughts that go down here end up being a spark. There is a lot of, it's like mining for gold. There's a lot of mud. There's a lot of dirt. There's a lot of junk that goes down, but there's also some flecks of gold. And if you pull all those together, you've got a pocket full of sparkle. I mean, come on, what's better than that? So if I go back and I say, when was the first time that I mentioned this storyline? And I remember once I open it, it was August 18th, 2007. And I remember I had just come back from a farmer's market in El Paso, and there was a German lady there, and she was selling bread. And you know how when you're at a farmer's market, and I'm sure there's farmer's markets around here, and you're fishing through your purse looking for the change or something, and I just asked her, so how'd you come to be in El Paso? I mean, it's pretty far, and you're very, she's elderly, and she was German, and she said, oh, I married an American soldier, and I moved here after the war. Boom, lightning, hit my brain right then, and I was like, oh. And I don't even remember the exchange of money or bread. I just remember walking away being like, how did she come here? Questions started popping up, and a story started forming in my head. How did she get to be here? She married an American soldier. That must have been a culture shock. That means she was in Germany during the war, during Nazi occupation. And it just started rolling, and I don't remember how I got home, to be honest. Somehow I got home, and I wrote in my journal. And I'll read you what I wrote. I'll share it. I just wrote, German culture in El Paso border town, Mexican-American mix, odd and interesting. How did German immigrants come to be here? Military connections. And then what's interesting to me to look at now is that I already had her name, Elsie. Way back then, before I thought this was going to be anything, I knew her name. And that's how I work as a writer, is I start with character. It's not an issue or a theme. I don't do that kind of writing. I start with a person in my head that I feel like I either know or I want to know more about. And then I keep thinking and dreaming on that person, and what their story is, where they came from, where they're going, and they become real. They bloom in my mind, and that's how I start writing my books. The same thing happened for my first book, The Time That Stood in Puerto Rico. It was a little girl, could not get her little voice out of my head. Why is she so sassy? And then I just started writing her. So I start with character. So I just wrote down, already there, I was writing down the pastries. So I was dreaming on, again, the sensations around my character now. What she was smelling, what she was tasting, what she was hearing, the sound of the oven timer and things like that. I very much am a writer of the senses in all my writing. So I started broaching with honey, black strong coffee, spätzle, tarts, amarettis, almond honey bar, strudel, poppy seeds, cream, all these, and then all the ingredients. So I didn't realize it yet then, but I was already thinking recipes that were in the back of the book. And that was, that was back again on August 17th, 2007. It's 2012, and this book is now coming out. So that's a little about the pastries, and then I look, a couple days later, I still couldn't get it out of my head, and I wrote down, on the 20th of August, Elsie's engaged to an SS officer before Americans come to Germany, wasn't in love with the officer, did it out of fear and to protect her family. She struggled between duty to family and her own independent nature. So I already knew this person, and that's who she ends up being in the book. Absolutely. But at the beginning, that spark of her was already in a journal. So I just wanted to share that a little bit on how I came up with the story. I thought you might be interested in that, especially with some writers in the group too, who can share that kind of moment where you, oh my goodness, how did that get there on the page? Now I'll read, and I'm going to read from the beginning, which is set in the past, and then I'll jump forward and I'll read a little bit deeper into the book from the present day storyline, which is Reba's. So you'll get a little bit of Elsie and then a little bit of Reba. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I may have to. Some crazy writers took me out last night. They're in the audience. I won't look at them. And my voice kind of gave out a little bit over dinner, but a little sweetness will bring it back. Okay. You're fine.
No, thanks.
All right. The Baker's Daughter. The prologue. Garmisch, Germany, 1945. Long after the downstairs oven had cooled to the touch, and the upstairs had grown warm with bodies cocooned in cotton sheets, she slipped her feet from beneath the thin coverlet and quietly made her way through the darkness, neglecting her slippers for fear that the clip might wake her sleeping husband. She paused momentarily at the girl's room, hand on the knob, and leaned an ear against the door. A light snore trembled through the wood, and she matched her breath to it. If only she could halt the seasons, forget the past and present, turn the handle and climb in beside her like old times. But she could not forget. Her secret pulled her away, down the narrow steps that creaked under her weight, so she walked on tiptoe, one hand balancing against the wall. In the kitchen, bundled dough mounds, as white and round as babies, lined the countertop and filled the space with the smell of milk and honey and promises of a full tomorrow. She lit a match. Its black head flamed and licked the candle wick before fuming to nothing. She preferred the candle's burning ribbons to the electric bulb, buzzing bright and incriminating high above. Armed soldiers patrolled outside their doors. She couldn't risk inciting curiosity or waking her family. She bent to her knees beneath the rising bread, pushed aside a blackened pot, and groped in the darkness for the split in the floorboard where she'd hidden the new letter. Her palms, calloused from the rolling pin, snagged on the timber planks, shallow splinters embedded in her skin, but she did not take notice. Her heart pounded in her ears and radiated through her arm and fingertips until she heard and felt the crackle of the paper she'd bunched into the crevice earlier. It had arrived in the day's mail, sandwiched between a receipt from their local miller and a long-since-forgotten edition of Signal magazine, its cover torn off, its pages watermarked beyond legibility, except for the pristine BMW ad boasting an aluminum bicycle for the modern rider. This tiresome correspondence made the letter's delicate handwriting and old-fashioned wax stand out. She'd recognized it at once and quickly turned it into her dirndl, before anyone in the post office could catch a suspicious glimpse. At home, her husband had called to her, "What's the news?" "Nothing new. Buy or take." She'd handed him the magazine and bill. "Take, take, take. The world never stops." She shoved her hands into her pockets, gripping the letter tight. Her husband grunted, tossed the disintegrated magazine into the trash, then slid a pointed blade across the top of the miller's note. He retrieved the receipt and held it close, summing the numbers in his mind and nodding in agreement. As long as it keeps on turning, man will wake with hunger each morning. And thank God for that. Otherwise we'd be out of business. Yeah? Yeah, she echoed. Where are the children? Out doing their chores, he'd replied. She'd nodded, then retreated to the empty kitchen to hide the letter until it was safe. Now, with the sickle moon hanging high above like a fishbone, she crouched low and brought the candle to the ground. The letter's waxy seal had been cracked by her earlier clutch. Fragments littered the tiles. She carefully swept them into the base of the burning candlestick, unfolded the paper, and read the familiar script. Her hands trembled with each weighty word. Sentences tallied. Her breath came faster and faster until she had to cover her lips to keep quiet. The candle flame arched and quivered. A blue vein pulsed in its core. The air had changed. She stiffened on the floor and listened to the faint rustle of movement on the other side of the kitchen. A mouse, she prayed, a stray dog sniffing at the back door, an alpine gust or passing ghost, anything but someone. She could not be discovered, not with this letter in hand. She scooted farther beneath the countertop, crumbling the paper into her lap and hugging the iron pot that stank of yesterday's stewed onions. She waited for the flame to curl upright and steady, staring so hard that her eyes began to burn. She closed them for relief and saw scenes like old photographs. Girls with matching bows at the end of plaited pigtails sitting beneath a fruit tree. A boy with limbs so thin they looked like bent reeds on the river's edge. A man with a face marred by shadows swallowing chocolate that oozed out a hole in his chest. A woman dancing in a bonfire without smoldering. Crowds of children eating mountains of bread. When she opened her eyes, the flame had gone out. The black of night was lifting to velvet blue. She'd fallen asleep in the hiding place. But morning was coming, and it would no longer be safe. She crawled out, bones creaking and popping. She carried the letter with her, hidden in the flimsy folds of her nightgown, and once more took the steps on tiptoe. Past the girls' room, through her bedroom door, she slipped beneath the covers, her husband abiding in dreamlessness. Slowly, and with great precision, she reached around the bedside and pushed the paper beneath the mattress, then rested her hand on her chest. Her heart felt foreign, as if someone else's thudded within, moving ceremoniously, while the rest of her lay numb and cold. The clock ticked on the bedside table, tick, 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 without the talk of the pendulum swing. Her heartbeat filled the balancing pulse. In her mind, she read the letter's words to the rhythm of the metronome. Then suddenly the clock erupted in clattering shouts. The hammer struck the bell again and again. She did not flinch. Her husband rolled over, pulling the blanket with him and exposing her body. She remained rigid as a corpse. He switched off the alarm clock, turned back to kiss her cheek, and rose. She feigned deep sleep, the kind that, when true, gives glimpse to eternity. Soon enough she would join him in the day, keeping silent what she knew and welcoming the white-hot sun as blamelessly as possible. She would tend to the children, scrub the dishes, wind the cuckoos, and sweep the floors. She would bake bread and glaze the buns in melted sugar. That's the prologue. Thank you. And now I'm going to read from present day, Reba's storyline. So you get a little bit of a sense of how the prose alternate between chapters and time periods. Elsie's German Bakery, El Paso, Texas, 2007. A Friday wedding kept the bakery busy the rest of the week, so Reba came back Saturday, determined to get her quotes and perhaps a few more Lebkuchen. When the bell over the door jingled, Jane turned from the shelf of hot loaves and rolls. "Well, looky here, good to see you." She came round the register and hugged Reba. Shocked stiff at first, Reba quickly relaxed in her embrace. The scent of Jane's perfume, honeysuckle and sandalwood, reminded her of childhood summers at the beach. She and Dee Dee spent whole days snacking on sweet flower stems and building driftwood castles on the dunes. "You too," she said, and walked back on her heels, eager to shake off the nostalgic ache. She hadn't returned any of Dee Dee's calls since Ricky's proposal. Each time Dee Dee rang, Reba convinced herself the timing wasn't right. She was too busy to chat. She'd call back later, then didn't. The weeks added up, and soon so much had happened that it seemed a daunting task to talk at all. Too much to cover in one conversation. I'll email Dee Dee tomorrow, she told herself. You've been busy? She asked Jane. Yep, the little gal we've known since diapers hitched up with a fella in Cruces. We do wonderful wedding cakes, Jane winked. Give us the date of yours and we'll have it ready. It'd be stale by the time I got around to it, said Reba. Double the fondant. Locks it up airtight. The inside keeps light as a feather, honestly. One of our brides kept a piece in the refrigerator, not even the freezer, until her 3rd anniversary, and said it tasted as good as the day she married. And that's no bull. A laugh popped up Reba's throat, and she liked the sound of it. I bet they had some wicked stomach aches. Maybe so, but they sure as heck didn't go to sleep empty. Jane turned to the kitchen. Mom, Reba from Sun City is here for the interview. A Mexican man at a cafe table with a gooey chocolate twist and a cream coffee sat. This is Sergio, introduced Jane. He's a regular. Sergio nodded. You need more sugar, Jane asked. I got all the sweetness I can handle. His Spanish accent made the sentence musical. Reba felt a sudden undercurrent in the room, like when she rubbed her socked feet along the carpets in winter. How long has he been coming? She asked Jane and took a seat. How long you been eating my rolls, Serge? Since you started counting your mama's nickels and dimes. He dipped his pastry in the coffee. Jane laughed. That was a test, and he did a good job slipping the noose. Reba's muscles tensed slightly at the idiom. Since I was 19, Jane continued. I remember the first time he walked in, didn't speak a lick of English, never mind German. Pointed to a roll and handed me change, half of which was in pesos. She slapped her thigh. That's a long time. I've never known anybody outside my family that long, Reba said. Time sneaks up on you. You're still young. You'll see. Her gaze drifted to Sergio, then quickly back to Reba. Mom will be out in a minute. On Jane's way to the kitchen, she stopped to hand him a napkin. Though he hadn't asked for one, he took it and smiled and wiped melted chocolate from his lips. Reba set the table. Steno pad, pen, recorder. While she waited, she tried to imagine the young girl from the photograph over 60 years later. Then, through the doorframe, came Elsie. Her snowy hair was bobbed short, the sides pinned back with brown bobby pins. She was cozy plump through the hips, but narrow in the waist, and wore a contemporary pair of khaki pants with a cream blouse rolled up at the sleeves. Even at 79, she was stylish and determined in her gait. She carried a plate with 2 slices of cinnamon raisin bread and set it in the middle of the table. Hello, she stuck out her hand. I'm Elsie Merriweather. Reba shook. Reba Adams. Elsie's grip was firm but warm. Nice to meet you. I apologize for not being able to speak the last time you came. She spoke clearly, but with a German clip. Elsie sat and nudged the plate closer to Reba. Jane says you do not eat milk, so I made this without. It is good. Reba didn't want to start the interview on the wrong foot, so she took it. Thank you. Oh, yes, she mumbled. It's very tasty. And she wasn't lying. Good, said Elsie. She broke off a piece and popped it in her mouth. So you would like to talk to me about being old? Reba swallowed too fast and choked a little. No, I'm doing a Christmas story. She composed herself. A cultural profile on holiday celebrations around town. Germans celebrate like everyone else. Christmas Eve we eat and drink. Christmas Day we do it again. I think this is how the Mexicans and Americans do it as well, correct? Elsie arched her eyebrow at Reba, challenging her. Reba tapped her pen on the steno. It wasn't exactly a quotable statement, at least not for the angle she wanted. Do you mind if I turn this on? She asked and thumbed the recorder. Elsie shrugged. As long as you promise not to put it on the internet. I'm not so old I have not seen the horse manure they put there. Nothing but naked bosoms and foul language. I was looking for sticky buns and you would not believe what came on my computer screen. In all my years I've never seen such a thing. Mom, said Jane from behind the register. Reba doesn't want to hear about that. I won't even mention what happened when I tried to find a chocolate jelly roll. Ah! Reba turned her face to the steno pad to hide her smile. Mom, I am just telling Mrs. Adams I don't want anything to do with such things. Reba cleared her throat. I promise. No internet. And please, call me Reba. Reba pushed the button on the recorder. It was time to get answers. So you're from Garmisch, Germany? Jane talked to me a little about that photograph over there. Reba pointed across the room. The one of you on Christmas Eve. Elsie broke off a raisin-laden corner. That old thing. I'm surprised the sun has not faded it to nothing. Probably best if so. That was a lifetime ago. I left Germany soon after. Did you ever go back? Reba asked. Didn't you miss home? Elsie met her gaze and held it. People often miss things that don't exist. Miss things that were, but are not anymore. So there or here, I'd still miss home, because my home is gone. Don't you consider the United States your new home? Doc, Texas is where I am, where my daughter is and my husband is buried, but it is not home. I won't find home again. Not on this earth. That is the truth. Reba inhaled deep and licked her lips. She needed a new approach. This was not coming easily. Could you tell me about a typical Christmas in Germany? She decided to be direct, cut and dry, get the information. I could not. Elsie popped another piece and chewed. I grew up during the war, so there were never typical Christmases. Okay. Reba drew a circle on her bag. A bullseye she needed to hit. How about that Christmas? She nodded to the photograph. Can you just tell me about that one? Elsie's gaze moved past Reba to the wall and the photograph hanging slightly askew on its nail. All right, I've done a lot of talking up here now. So how about I open the floor and let you all ask questions and we can just chat. I'm actually gonna come around and sit and just take questions and chat. Yes, go ahead.
So what was your inspiration for Reba?
Reba. I, at the time, had just moved to El Paso. And I just moved to El Paso and I was writing anywhere I could just to make a little money. And so I was writing for the local magazine, I was writing for the newspaper, anything that I could get I was doing stories for. And after the farmer's market, I mentioned something about, are there some Germans here? To my editor, and she said, yes, and actually, it's funny you should mention that. This is, again, the Cosmos doing some orchestrating. Funny you should mention that. We really want you to do a cover story on the German community. So can you go to this bakery across town and interview around? And so I went and did the interview, and that became an easy occupation for Reba, but the inspiration for Reba as a person, people say, oh, well, then is that you? Not at all. It's so not me. And it actually is based, her personality and some of her deep, dark issues are based on one of my roommates in college. Oh, it's being video recorded. I mean, a friend that I knew at some point. But she was, when you have a roommate, you live with them, and so you get to really know them, even their secrets, even the ones they don't want you to know. And I was diagnosed with celiac disease in about 2001, and I had a roommate who about a week later announced to everyone, because there were 4 of us who lived in our place. She said, I'm lactose intolerant. If I eat milk, I will die. And I remember we were like, oh, and I thought, oh my goodness, how strange that we both, maybe something in the water. We both have these food allergies, but now I have someone who can like make food with me, and we can be very careful, and we can clean everything. It'll just be nice to have this friend. We can commiserate on our GI issues. It's like person. And so I was really quite excited. And I was like, oh. And about a month later, after a night out, a night out in college. There's some young ones over there. I'm looking over there. I came home and there was an empty box of cheese sticks on her floor. And I said, oh my gosh, did you eat the cheese sticks? You're going to get sick. And she was a little bit inebriated. And she said, oh, I just say that. And I said, what do you mean you just say that? She said, I just tell people that. I'm not really. And it started my wheels turning. Like, what would make a person say that. It didn't make any sense to me. And so I asked her, why would you say that? I said, because I have been diagnosed by a doctor and it's horrible and it's not something you want to have. Why would you invite that into your life simply because? And she said, oh, well, it makes it something about it's good for the environment. And I just, again, it made not a lick of sense. It still doesn't to me. But I know her well enough too, that person, that she had some that I didn't write about. I made it totally different for Reba, and she has her own, but she had some deep childhood psychological issues. And what was fascinating to me in writing is how psychological issues from childhood can influence an adult to react or have a reaction in just a way that's completely different than anything you would think is normal or proper, and yet it is how they are dealing with that psychological issue of their childhood. And so that went into Reba. I don't know if you've read the book yet, but okay, I won't. Okay, I need to stop there then. But that definitely helped in my writing of Reba, in how she would take one thing and not deal with that, run away from that issue of her past and her childhood, and twist it so that way she embraced this other issue that I'll let you find out as you read, now that I know you haven't read it. It's to take on this other issue that wasn't true. So
Great, thank you.
you're welcome. I was probably a little more than
Oh
you
no,
know.
it's great.
Okay. Go ahead.
Have you ever spoken to the person that inspired Elsie?
I went back to the farmer's market. Yeah, it sounds like I'm stalking her, and I kind of was probably. I went back to the farmer's market to try to find her, and there was another bakery there that was selling baked goods, and I don't think it wasn't the same. And then I just recently went back, and there was a man there, and I said, I recognize your packaging. I went this fall, and I said, is your mother elderly? He said, yeah, my mom's in her 80s. And I said, oh, was she here like years ago? Oh, she comes every year. I said, oh, where is she? And he said, oh, she's not here now. I'm her son. And so then that's so interesting to me, because I wrote my character and she has a daughter, and that's her family, is Reba, Jane and Elsie, or that's it. And then I come and I find out that the one who inspired has a son, not a daughter. And so now I almost don't want to meet her, if I can be honest with you. I know that sounds, but I've created this character, and I love her. I love my Elsie, and she's got a whole story. She's got a whole book. She's got a whole book of a story about her. And I almost worry that if I met the real one, that, I don't know, that bubble would be burst. I would love to meet her, but I wouldn't, I would love to meet her just to be like, you inspired me.
Right.
I want to hug you because I'm a hugger,
Just don't tell
and
me.
that's it. But I wouldn't expect anything from her. But I would love to see her again. Now I know her son, which is kind of neat. Go ahead.
Was her name Elsie?
No.
Or did you just?
No, yeah, no. The bakery was called Marina's German Bakery. That I went and you mean the lady at the farmer's market? Yeah, no, that wasn't her name. That wasn't her name. I never knew her name. Elsie just was a lightning bolt in my head. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Sure.
These are kind of two unrelated questions, but one is kind of what took you to El Paso, and the second is, do you by any chance know Albert Borghese? Did you know him when he was writing in El Paso?
I don't know him personally, no,
Okay,
but
because he wrote you know who he is?
yes, yes.
Okay, because he wrote a book while he was in El Paso, the tennis partner.
No, I haven't met him. I don't know him, but it's funny
I just was
because
wondering what kind of a writing community you find.
Oh.
You're finding.
if I can be honest, in El Paso there's really not much of one. Now I have met writers here in Boston, and I realize what a thriving, I am jealous of the writing community here. It's amazing. But in El Paso, people keep to themselves. It's definitely that Old West feel where people are in their houses. They don't really, it's almost like, I guess, back to the days when it was founded, when it was like ranches and you didn't really see your neighbors from, 6 months or once a year. People are definitely it's a different than what I experienced in Virginia too, in my writing community in Virginia from where I came from. But what brought me out there is that man standing over there, my husband. He is doing his residency at Fort Bliss there, so he's working there. So it's funny that you mentioned Abraham, because medicine. So that's what took me all the way across the United States. But my family and everyone are back home in Virginia. Any other? Oh, fun. Oh, go ahead.
What are you working on now?
Right
if
now,
you can tell.
I'm working on my third book. I'm in the middle of sort of, as you know, I journal, and so I outline everything, and it takes months. In Dallas, I showed the crowd in Dallas that between that and when I actually started writing, I mean, that's just, writing anything down, but actually writing on a Word document was about 6 months. It was a long time of just pages and pages, almost half of this journal filled with just little things, and not one after the other either. I mean, in between are movie stubs and places, postcards and all sorts of stuff. But it took about 6 months before I started actually writing, and also researching. It took a lot of research. I wanted to really understand and have a mental image of Garmisch then and Garmisch now. I needed to understand El Paso because I had just moved there at the time. I needed to get to know the culture. So right now, my point, to answer your question, is that I outlined, it took me about 3 or 4 months to outline my next novel, and so now I've just started writing it. And it's, I don't want to give, when you're at the beginning and you're a writer, it's like, how do I, you never know where it's going to go. And so I'd hate to give an out, this is what it's about, and it ends up not being about that at all. But I'm kind of obsessed with motherhood right now and parenting and what it means to mother and nurturing is what it keeps me up at night. And I write about things that I can't sleep because I'm thinking about it all night long. And so I have a character in mind. Obviously, I start with character. And what it means to nurture when the traditional path of being a parent isn't available, or you don't choose it. And can you still be a mother or a father without giving birth to children? Is that possible? So it's an interesting, and it's taken me all sorts of various places. And I love my character and they, I'm giving more away, it's a couple, a man and a woman, and they have all sorts of just tangles. And I love characters with tangles because then you get to untangle. You get to get them more tangled, and then you get to untangle them. And so they are all tangled right now, and I'm writing that out. So that's where I am, and it's a contemporary story. So that one is kind of it's set in the '60s in Puerto Rico. First person, 11-year-old child. This coming of age is that story. This one is present day contemporary with a historical. And then the one I'm writing right now is present day contemporary. And then, but I think I already have some stuff coming out of my new journal, because this one obviously is all filled up and done, where I think I'll probably dip back into, after I finish this contemporary work, dip back into the historical, because I love researching. I could research for hours. I could hold down in a library with old books spread out around me and just be like, hello friend, hello friend, hello friend. I love researching, so that's kind of, my work is different places.
Did you interview any Holocaust survivors for this, or was it all research?
I didn't interview any Holocaust survivors, no. It was all research, and I don't even think I know any Holocaust survivors. It was all research and reading other people's both nonfiction and fiction books. But I was lucky in that I lived in Germany. So I lived in Germany as a child, and then my husband's family lived in Germany while we were in college and a little bit afterwards. And my husband went back every summer and every break and everything, and so the last time I visited Germany was in 2001. My husband was working in Garmisch at a restaurant there. And I had just finished a semester study abroad in Italy. So I said, hey, we're in Europe, you're in Europe, you're with your parents, and I'm, well, he wasn't then, he was in Garmisch, his parents were in another city. I said, I'll come visit you, I'll come stay. And so that was the last time I was able to actually put foot in my setting, which was nice. And I know it seems like a long time ago now, 10 years, but I guess time flies and it doesn't seem that long in my imagination. But that's where a lot of my research, I had to look at old maps and such, but I knew what Garmisch felt like. I knew what it smelled like. I knew the hidden nooks and crannies of where to go hiking, and because I'd been there. So, any more? Yes.
You mentioned celiac disease, and I have cousins and in-law cousins who are gluten-free and claim, some that have been diagnosed with celiac. One of my cousins is on the warpath against gluten, and hear about it all the time. And I actually want to give it up because I know it's healthier for everybody. But I'm just curious if you have recipes. Did you include any gluten-free?
Oh, no gluten-free.
Elsie doesn't make gluten-free.
No, and that's I said to someone, I said, why would I do that? I live that life. This is my imagination. I get to go. I got to eat. Elsie got to just have a party. So I got to live vicariously through my characters here, and that was fantastic to spend all those years writing about all these delicious things that I ate all the way up until 2001. So I still remember them, and I got to conjure them back up. And I ate with my husband in Germany. He got to see the results. But
so who tested your recipes?
All of them. Yes, and a lot of them came from my mom's, because we lived in Germany. My mom's cookbooks from Germany. They came from my mother-in-law. She lived in Germany, and she did a lot. She still does a tremendous amount of German foods. So he worked at a restaurant. So I knew that, a German restaurant there, I knew that I had people who would help me out there. So he was my taste tester.
A question for you about the style of writing, how you managed to do it. When you were writing these two storylines that are very different both in time and place, did you write them in order in which they appeared in the book, straight through from the beginning to the end, or did you try to tell one person's story in its entirety, so you had that set in your mind while you're writing it, and then write the other one and weave them in together?
That would be the smart way to do it. Probably better, easier. But I outlined both of their stories from beginning to end. So even though I met an elderly woman who sparked my idea, I didn't write her as an elderly woman. In my imagination, I thought, okay, so she was in Germany. How old was she in Germany then during Nazi occupation? She had to have been, 15, 16, 17, 18 to be this old now. And then suddenly this image of this young girl was in my mind, and I've shared her story at that point. And I wrote it out. I do outline. I outlined her whole story all the way through from there, all the way till El Paso elderly woman that sparked the story in my mind. And then Reba's story I outlined from interviewing the elderly Elsie all the way forward to the end. So I outlined those, but then when I wrote it, it just came out that I wrote chapter alternating. And then, see, this is where it would have been smart to just do one right. At the very end, when I was finished and I went into revision, I took them apart. I had to. I mean, even though it came out organically back and forth, I had to rip the seams apart of my book and look at all of Elsie's lined up, top to bottom, read it through for myself, change it, revise. Then I do all of Reba, and then I put them back together. And so, the book as it came out, I mean, the letters are completely different. The chapters are switched from my original. Things are all sorts of different, at least for the first half, because that's where I was trying to get the momentum, how I wanted the stories to line up like puzzle pieces. And those tracks, if you think about like a train tracks, to kind of line up so that it was a smooth ride. So it was a lot of work that I didn't anticipate when I just sat down to start writing. But I think I couldn't have done it any other way. That's just how. It's a good question, though. It's a good form question. Anybody else? I actually have one, just to let you all know. Oh, I brought a gift for just in store, but you can't get it online. I'm not mailing these out. These are nowhere else except for in my book events. So I'm bringing them just to those, and they are recipes. Bonus recipes, not in the book, and not only that, but these are different cards than I gave out in Dallas. So you guys get like, so this one is, let's see, this one is Reba's Farmer's Bread. And this is the bakery. So you'll get a picture of the actual bakery in El Paso that I went to, and they let me hang out back in their bakery place and ask questions, and the man who owned it was incredibly wonderful, and so that's me out front in my red hat. So these are all for you. Thank you all so much.